All right, got the green light. Hopefully, you're recording. You only have to not record one time, and then, bad stuff happens. Going into chapter 4, moving right along. I guess a little bit before we go into that, we mentioned the vine and the fig tree last time, and I don't want to go through this whole PowerPoint, so I kind of try to smash it all into one slide. What I think the fig, the olive tree, and the vine picture. And a lot of agricultural themes throughout the Bible. So it's hard to cover all this in one slide, of course, but just give us some ideas. And I'm sure this is going to change. This is just what I've come to. I've been working on this PowerPoint for a while. The whole point of this started with, what are we grafted into? What does grafting mean? Why do we use the term grafting? Well, there's lots of agricultural terms used in the Old Testament that Paul was drawing from, that Jesus was drawing from, for all these garden terminology. And then we're like, oh, lo and behold, the temple's a picture of the garden, and all these Eden, returning to Eden, everything is kind of connected. So anytime we see vine or vineyard, I'm thinking, wonder what is the spiritual message here. So the vineyard is the land of promise, but the vine is the people of promise. The fig tree is Israel's spiritual condition and a sign of when the Messiah will return, because he literally said, that's why. And there's several slides talking about that. Remember, he curses the fig tree outside of the temple on Passover. So the temple system that brings ritual purity, a physical righteousness. So ceremonial purity was another way to say that. And I think the fig tree represents that. So it's a blessing in a way, because it's like the temple. It's almost kind of like the garden. The olive trees are the faith and obedience that feeds the menorah, which is the tree of life. More garden terminology, because the temple, it had a golden vine on the door. You were entering the vineyard. There's pomegranate trees. As you entered the Holy of Holies, there's the tree of life. You were close to God's presence. That's where we had, Adam in the garden, dwelling with God, what we're trying to get back to. So the 7 churches in Revelation, Judah and Ephraim, or a picture of the 2 houses of Israel, are the 2 trees that we'll kind of see pictured here in Zechariah 4 that make up these churches. Ultimately, it's a sign of the covenant made with Yahweh through faith. Remember when Noah was on the ark and the dove brought back an olive branch. So it's a sign of, I'm going to make a covenant with you, right? And it's this promise of the covenant. The covenant doesn't change. Stays the same. It's not like a new covenant replaces the old covenant. So the root of the good tree is Yeshua. We kind of had the idea of the branch last time. And I was looking up a lot of that stuff. Got on some rabbit trails. I might get into them. And does that mean there is a bad tree? And that's kind of what I mean. There's this, you start looking up all the branches in the Old Testament. We see Nebuchadnezzar's dream of this giant tree, and it's like, is that a picture of Israel? It gets chopped down. Why is God even dealing with this unbeliever, if you will, who's not in covenant with him? Is it showing us what's going to happen to Israel? It's kind of easy to derive that, but we might be looking at something completely different. We might be looking at Babylon itself, kingdom of light, kingdom of darkness. So quick little buzzwords here. So Israel, that's we got them at the top here. So vine is Israel, fig tree is temple, olive covenant. Israel, think the vine, the vineyard. So it's the land of the people of promise, those in covenant with Yahweh, the vineyard of the vine. So the vineyard is the promised land. Eventually the promised land will be all Eden, covering all the earth. Right, that's the goal. So New Jerusalem during the millennial reign. That's going to be the vineyard. It's going to be expanded. This thing is huge. It covers the whole Middle East. Got a little picture here. People keep talking about the golden cube. There's the dimensions. I'd probably shift it more left. I don't think it's going to sit more there. It's not even covering Israel right there. So a little to the left there. 1,380 miles. And think about the tree there. Where was I? the tree of, in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, maybe a picture of the Tower of Babel. Probably pretty big as well. Probably nowhere near that big. It was in the plains of Shinar, so it probably took up a big portion of the Fertile Crescent. But God does it bigger, right? The fig tree, so that's righteousness. Eden, it's the garden. Picture of all the temples that were first temple, second temple, the tabernacle, were all modeled after it. It's a picture of the eighth day, which is the eighth millennium, which is the never-ending Sabbath, or in Sukkot there's an eighth day, which is the greatest celebration of the year. The blessings that come from the covenant. So we think like temple, we think these ritual things we got to do when they're bad, but no, they bring blessing. The ability to be close to the temple, being close to God's presence, it can be very harsh, or it can be very blessing. Keep, like in the wilderness, their sandals didn't wear out, and the bread and the showbread would last longer. The manna, there's lots of blessings that come from being in close proximity with God, but that means you've got to be ritually clean as well. So you can't think of it the same as sin. It's an impurity. And one of my questions has been, can Jesus become impure when he was on his ministry? That's a harder question. And he might be the exception to the rule there, because he is touched by unclean women and the bleeding, and she gets healed, and he feels power go out from him. I'm like, when did the power go out? Because God had to withdraw from him because he came unclean, because he was touched by a woman with a bleeding disease. It gets tricky. But I would say that he's probably an exception to that rule. So the fruit is a picture of the fruit of the Spirit. So these blessings are going to come in that form. It's not always a material thing. People are like, I'm doing what God wants me to do, but it's like life's getting harder. Yeah, because he's teaching you, he's growing you, he's refining you, and we get stuck on this stuff. So let's keep moving. But it's a good point to make that the fig tree is going to have fruit. Why was it cursed? Because it just had leaves. Jesus cursed it because it only had leaves, and the fruit's supposed to come before the leaves. And so he's saying, you're not ready. These leaves shouldn't be here. The fruit should be here. Imbalance. But, the fig tree doesn't actually bear fruit until, late in the summer. So there is some depth to that one. You can't just throw that blanket statement on there. There's something more hidden there, and that's what I spent some slides on, but we don't have time to get into them today. So the olive tree, covenant, we talked about the olive branch. It's faithful obedience. Oil is faith. We see that with the wise virgins. They had the lamp, and the oil was their faith. They didn't have the oil, means they lost faith. They had to run out and try to get it, but it was too late. So keep your faithful. That's why I said faithful obedience. Because you're obedient, it's a sign of the oil. It's like you can't have faith without obedience. So the oil that feeds the tree of life, of our faith, by God's grace, will bring Israel eternal life. And you're in covenant with God, you have faith with him, you're faithful, obedient. That's the tree of life, access to the tree of life. So the witness of Yahweh's faithfulness to his covenant. From in Judah, Torah and the prophets, we see these two olive trees. We see them again in Revelation, except there's two menorahs. Still trying to figure out why there's two menorahs there and one menorah in Zechariah's vision here. Usually people say, well, that's the New Testament. I do like the idea of the two witnesses being the Torah and the prophets. That's why Moses and Elijah are chosen. You think about who was the greatest prophet, Elijah, and who brought us the Torah, the first 5 books, which is the law, which is definitely separate and different ideas. The prophets really confirm a lot of what the Torah says, but the Torah is almost written with Moses right from God. So it's special. So Moses, Elijah, why those are two witnesses? Might be because of God's testament, his word. So you are grafted into the cultivated olive tree through faith in Yahweh's salvation. Just some ideas there. Let's move on now that we have a little bit of grasps there. Again, those are all big topics. Let's blow this up. And the angel who talked with me, so this is kind of the most powerful vision here. So the angel talked with him. He's waking him up, really. which is a little different. Before, he just kind of had dreams and saw some visions, and that angel's directly coming to him. So this might be the most powerful vision we see yet. And the angel who talked with me came again and woke me, like a man is awakened out of his sleep, and said to me, "What do you see?" And I said, "I see, and behold, a lampstand all of gold, with a bowl on top of it, and 7 lamps on it, with 7 lips on each of the lamps that are on top of it. And there are 2 olive trees by it, one on the right of the bowl, and the other on its left. And I said to the angel who talked with me, 'What are these, my Lord?' Then the angel who talked with me answered and said to me, 'Do you not know what these are?' And I said, 'No, my Lord.'" Definitely a recurring pattern. "Don't you know?" It's like, "No." "Do we know?" "No." Then he said to me, "This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel. Not by my power, not by my might, nor by my power, but my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain." A little note here from probably myself. Let's see what it says. Okay, so the top stone reference to the New Jerusalem is a perfect cube upon which the temple shall be built. A picture of Jesus himself as the living stone. So the mountain needs to be laid waste so this new stone can be set. We see partial fulfillment with 70 AD. That's Jerusalem being destroyed. Past fulfillment with 586 BC. That's destruction by Babylon. But also future complete fulfillment when the world is judged. So the whore of Babylon may be in fact Jerusalem that gets destroyed. So that's my thing I've been trying to get at there. So the top stone we had reference to, I think we're going to get reference into just now. I don't think we've talked about it yet. It's hard for me to remember because I'm all over the place here. So I'm studying the chapters ahead, studying chapters below. I'm like, yeah, we've covered this top stone. Living stone, not yet. So we'll try to make some sense of that. But we looked at the New Jerusalem. It's perfect stone. It's a perfect cube, picture of the Holy of Holies. And the temple's going to be built upon that. You can think about, there's going to be an actual temple for that 1,000 years. But the temple really built upon that stone is what? The whole earth becoming Eden. Remember, Eden's a temple. All the temples were modeled after Eden. It's cool that I can make notes like that. So that's the first one I ever did. So there you go. And he shall bring forward the top stone amid shouts of grace, grace to it. So a great mountain, getting leveled, becoming a plain, make way for this top stone to come down. Sounds a lot like New Jerusalem to me, just like I said. Again, we see that with the picture of, going back to Daniel, because we see a couple things from him as far as the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. We have the tree also, but those are both kind of in that same chapter, I think, or the one right before it. And the statue is destroyed, and then we have this boulder come down, and this mountain is set up. So showing that Babylon's going to be destroyed, New Jerusalem's going to come down. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, "The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also complete it. Then you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. For whoever has despised the day of small things shall rejoice, and shall see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel." So there's always like fulfillment in context too. I think, yes, Zerubbabel is definitely building a temple right now. This is partial fulfillment. Full fulfillment, we're like, do we really see this full fulfillment in this bring forward the top stone and the great mountains becoming a plain? Not fully here, but we see that Zerubbabel is going to carry this out, and then there's going to be another Zerubbabel type character for the New Jerusalem. So Jesus, Zerubbabel, they share some qualities, just as Joshua the high priest in the last chapter shared some qualities as king priest as well. So these 7 are the eyes of the Lord. I think we talked about 7 being a picture of the menorah. We have the gold lampstand here. It could also be on the menorah. There is Josephus records that each lampstand stood for one of the wandering stars. And they would have considered even the sun and the moon, one of those 2 on there. Probably the sun being the Shamash candle, and the rest of them were like Jupiter and Venus and stuff like that. The wandering stars are the ones that are unlike the constellations, which kind of stay constant. The wandering stars move around planets in the solar system. So they would just regard them as special, different. These are the eyes of the Lord, which range through the whole earth. Then I said to him, what are these 2 olive trees on the right and the left of the lampstand? And a second time I answered and said to him, what are these 2 branches of the olive trees? So they're the branches coming down, feeding the menorah from the olive trees, which are besides the 2 golden pipes from which the golden oil is poured. And he said to me, do you not know what these are? I said, no, my Lord. Then he said, these are the 2 anointed ones who stand by the Lord of the whole earth. So ambiguous, right? Good reference to the 2 anointed ones, the witnesses in Revelation. Is this Moses and Elijah? Is it simply the Torah and the prophets? Because the Word is the witness, right? The biggest witness that's been throughout time is His Word. It stands. Jesus is a picture of the Word as well. So these are witnesses of what? The tree of life, the gold lampstand, that eternal life, return to Eden. His Word is the witness pointing to that. So that's kind of like the spiritual. I think there's something physical. So we have Zerubbabel in context, right? Zerubbabel and Joshua being these 2 witnesses right now. And then we have some sort of prophetic fulfillment later. Who are these 2 witnesses that come down? The witnesses in Revelation, who are pictures of the Torah and the prophets. Let's take a look at some of the notes. See picture of maybe what this bowl looked like, or feeding the oil into the lamp. The lamp maybe wasn't a menorah, but kind of get the idea that it is. Okay, so lampstand of olive gold with a bowl on top of it. There are 7 lamps on it, with 7 lips on each of the lamps that are on top of it. The bowl is to hold oil to fuel the lamp. You can see how the wicks would come down, and they would fill a lamp that possibly would look like this. Is probably what they're proposing, the Coronis ring. See how that would work with the bowls there, and the wicks go in and feed. Which is not exactly how the menorah worked, right? It didn't have like a bowl on top. So the bowl is to hold the fuel to the lamp, and the 7 lips direct the oil to the wicks at the end of the lips. 7 being a number representing completeness, all-knowing, is an appropriate number of wicks, since the lamp seems to represent God's comprehension of what is happening in the world. Theoretically, such a lamp can be envisioned and support can be adduced using artificial evidence. Artifactual evidence. I'm like, artificial evidence. That makes no sense. Artifactual evidence. A 7-spouted lamp was found at Tel Dothan, dating to the late Bronze Age. Other finds suggest that multiple lamps were sometimes arranged around the edge of the bowl. No artifacts combine these features to illustrate the object being described here, and all alternative suggestion that has been on the basis of known artifacts is the lamp is the Coronis ring, though these terracotta vessels were typically used for libations. Examples have been found in Palestine dating to the Persian period that show evidence of their use as lamps. So there we go. Still going to go with the menorah myself, try to keep it simple. 2 olive trees. The vision described here probably concerns that which is or will be inscribed on the foundation stone. So this is a good point, is that this is probably the picture of what will be on this foundation stone, which is being taken from the old temple, being set in the new temple, just like the New Jerusalem is a picture of the foundation stone coming down. It's inscribed with what? Torah and the prophets. In this case, the stones referred to in chapter 4 would be the same as the stones mentioned in chapter 3. So I guess we did talk about the stone before. Yeah, we did. The lampstand and the trees may be evaluated in light of the iconography of the ancient Near East, where it is not uncommon for figures to be portrayed flanking a stylized representation of deity. The crescent moon emblem with upturned horns not only represents the deity, but also is reminiscent of the bowl of a lamp. In these seals, the symmetry of two trees represents two worshippers, as is also the case in Zechariah's vision. Who are the two worshippers? Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest. Picture of also Ephraim and Judah, the two houses of Israel, two witnesses that go out into the world, right? They're scattered amongst the nations, literally. And that's what we kind of talked about in the beginning of that PowerPoint slide. There's a lot of witnesses. Heaven and earth are witnesses. It's hard to boil down exactly what is meant by two witnesses. There's a lot of information that goes with it. So what are you, O great mountain, before Zerubbabel? You shall become a plain. The height on which the temple stood made hauling up construction materials difficult. The speaker is promising that a commitment to rebuilding the temple, God will make this height seem a trivial matter. The top stone in Mesopotamia, part of the rebuilding of a temple, involved bringing out a stone from the earlier structure to be installed in the new building, demonstrating continuity. It may well be that this is the stone that Zerubbabel is bringing out and why it receives so much attention. If this association is accurate, as seems likely, it would be better to translate this as the foundation stone, which its importance designating it as the primer stone, or premier stone. Temple building accounts refer to both the removal of this stone from the site so that leveling the site could take place and to reinstalling it at the appropriate time. So is it getting leveled? Yes. Has to be. Is the whole city going to be leveled? The whole land going to be leveled for New Jerusalem? Yes, it has to be. So then we go into chapter 5 there. So let's stop for now. Feel free to leave your questions and comments. I know I have just as many questions and comments. Let me just open my Bible here. And we'll just take a quick look. Let's see if I've marked anything. I'm in Zechariah, am I? Maccabees. I was reading Maccabees for Hanukkah. Now that it's over, let's see if we can find Zechariah. The problem with this Bible is nothing is in order. As I grew up with it, reading King James. Zechariah 10:13. All those sword drills were completely useless. Alright, Habakkuk, Haggai, Zechariah. So we talked about the fig tree and the vineyard and all that. The menorah it manifests the glory of Yahweh. So is its purpose. And our job is to be the light to the nations, a living menorah. Also, one thing I thought about is, well, maybe we have the tree of life, but we also have the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Possibly this is the other menorah that we see in Revelation. Kind of returning more to that garden state that we see both those trees there. Full completion. So we mentioned that probably this, and a lot of people think this should be the flag, is the menorah with the two olive trees. It should be the Israeli flag because it's put on this top stone. So the 7 eyes might have been 7 jewels above the lampstand, possibly indicating the 7, the moon and the sun and these wandering stars. And the 2 worshipers bring oil, right? So faith, they're bringing faith, they're believing, they're worshiping what? Yahweh. Yahweh, the 7 eyes, picture of completeness, all-knowing. It is a picture of him as well as his word. What else do we got? Isaiah 59. We look at the Redeemer who comes to Zion to atone for Jacob. We have Zephaniah 3:11. Just some references if you want to look them up. References to the holy mountain that we saw before. That we're seeing in verse 7 of 4. And also the headstone is a picture of Jesus. I think we mentioned that, but just reiterate that. also have a picture of how can Jerusalem be destroyed in 3 days, and in 3 days be rebuilt, because Jesus is a picture of the top stone. It's a picture of the living stone that's part of the temple. So when he comes back, in a way, that is the temple, right? And the two witnesses, what do? They preach and prophesy. So the two witnesses, even now, the law and the prophets, they do preach and prophesy through the written word. So I wrote the high priest anoints. It's the menorah. So he is a picture of one of the anointed ones. And what are these branches a picture of? With this connection to the menorah, is that a picture of grafting itself? Yes, they're feeding oil, but it shows that we have to be grafted to the root. So there could be a picture of that as well, the root of Jesse. All interesting thoughts. I like it. Even the churches could be a picture of the two anointed ones, the 7 churches in Revelation. Those are all little notes I wrote in the margins there. And hopefully we'll have our second meeting soon here. It's been tough with all the holidays, but we'll get back. But it's allowed me to get through these 4 chapters and spend some extra time with it. So I always like that. So I know I brought more questions than answers with that one, just as I usually do. But I do like that final thought there, being grafted into the tree. And that's what it's all about, this idea of adoption. And we could be ungrafted too. Just because you're bloodline Israel, that's not what this passage is saying, or the last, or the branch, or Paul was even saying. It was saying that we're all adopted. We're all, even Abraham by faith. It wasn't his bloodline that saved him, it was his faith. So olive tree, think faith. It's not about living in Israel, about living in the vineyard, because you could be living in the vineyard and not be part of the vine, right? The menorah, the tree of life that we need to be grafted into. Who gives life? Who's the living stone? Who gives the living water? It's Jesus. He is the root of Jesse. He is the branch that we need to be connected to. All right? And we need to bear fruit, or else we'll be cut off. And what is the fruit? It's a picture of the fig tree and the fruits of the Spirit, and righteousness. Even without the temple, you still have Yeshua in the heavenly temple. So there's still a temple, and we just need that connection between heaven and earth, which is what New Jerusalem is a picture of as well, is that connection, that bridge between heaven and earth. And that's why Babylon, or the Tower of Babel, was built. And then we see, who ruled Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. So there's a lot of ideas between Nebuchadnezzar and Nimrod. I think I wrote some thoughts that weren't really complete. Let's see if we can kind of end with that. Some craziness. I like to end with a little craziness. This whole PowerPoint is becoming such a mess. We've got 50 slides now. It's crazy. Just to answer one simple question. That's how it starts. Next thing you know, you got a novel on your hands. So Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, Nimrod. Nebuchadnezzar's just a picture of Nimrod, who was really just a picture of what? Satan. So the whore of Babylon isn't Babylon. It's not Rome. It's Jerusalem. It's the only thing that really makes sense to me anymore. I don't even know how I thought that way before, because God has a relationship and a covenant with Israel. That's who he's going to judge and talk with and refine. He's not worrying about Babylon, right? Obviously they have a chance to repent and join Israel, but he's only talking with his bride. He's only communicating with his bride. He's going to destroy Babylon at the end. So I think it is a picture, this tree that gets chopped down. I was thinking that I saw a music video. I remember a music video. I didn't think much of it at the time, but there was this old giant tree that was chopped down. They kind of just, whenever they do it roller rinks, they kind of just did that to the tree trunk, and they were skating around on them. It's kind of old school, kind of cool idea. I just imagine this giant tree, just how big this stump was. And it says they sealed it with a bands of iron and bronze. I'm like immediately thinking, okay, are these the two kingdoms of Greece and Rome? And why would you bind a stump? So I was looking into that. So the bands would, in a way, preserve the stump from cracking. They would hold it together. As it would crack, the moisture would get in, then kind of rot. So it would keep it alive, but also kind of prevent it from growing and branches from coming out the sides. Because they usually don't see the branch coming out of the top. It would come out from the side, but if there's bands there, it wouldn't allow that. So it kind of just showing the binding of the devil until the final empire of iron and clay, right? Because it's a different empire, which I think we are in that final empire. I think it's a very similar empire to Persia, so relates exactly to what Zechariah is going through because they're dealing with the Persian Empire. So there's some people are back in the land, right? But there's a lot of the northern kingdom, southern kingdom, they're still scattered about that never come back. We're still waiting on that final redemption, that final return. So just as kind of Yahweh withdraws himself, he withdraws Satan as well. So before the flood we have, and it's really interesting because I was asking my buddy Daniel about this, reading the book of Daniel. So I asked Daniel about Daniel. And I was like, just reading it, and he's like, what is this? And he was tired. He's like, Watchers. What are you reading, Enoch? But it's interesting that the word Watcher is used to describe this kind of heavenly being that comes down and cuts down the tree. And immediately I'm thinking pre-flood. The Watchers came down. There were these angels. I think they came with good intentions, but Satan used mankind to trick them into, even if it wasn't to breed these Nephilim offspring, which is where we get a lot of mythology from, all derived from these angels coming down, which would be the gods. We get the Titans from their mixing, and then we get these chimera, these creatures that are mixed, and that's where Babylonian mythology and Greek and Roman built off of. And it's like, the Jews just got it from them, or maybe they all just got it from the same source. But either way, they eventually taught man war, and they lusted after women. And they're like, well, angels can't sleep with mankind. How can that happen? They can take on other forms. So they're probably seraphim class. Seraphim class were shapeshifters. So they could take on the form of a human. Because we're wondering, how does God destroy angels at, the final judgment? Those who had fallen are going to be judged with Satan and the beast and all that. So there has to be a way to destroy these spiritual beings. So they can turn into a physical form that can be destroyed. But then what goes along with that is them turning into a physical form which can bring life. And I think after the flood, all those, according to Peter and Jude, we see that those were bound. Obviously, they were reading a lot of the Second Temple writings of Enoch and other things, that these angels were bound somewhere under the earth. They were kept away, so they couldn't do what they were doing. And any angel, after seeing that, probably wouldn't be like, well, let's do that again. I don't think there was a second incursion. I don't think angels came down again. I think Nimrod and Nebuchadnezzar found a way to tap into that, their knowledge, really, how they had corrupted the seed before. Because you can corrupt the seed, you corrupt the line of Yeshua, and you stop God's plan. So that's probably what Satan tricked them into doing, because he's the ultimate deceiver. We saw Satan in chapter 3, so bringing him back up again. So my wheels have been spinning in this direction. And you can just read the rest of that if you want to. Just some ideas, maybe completely off. 7 cycle, 7 millennium. We have the Tower of Babel, mimicking what God's trying to do with the Jerusalem. He's always trying to do what God's trying to do, because he wants to be like God. So he's always doing something similar. He's trying to mirror it. The whole tree, the great tree, is a picture of this bridge between heaven and earth, which is what he's trying to do, connect heaven and earth. So it's cut down. His power is removed, and really, during the periods of what Greek and Roman, we see kind of this dark spiritual time. Jesus comes, and after he leaves, everything kind of falls apart in Israel. And then it's almost like we haven't really heard from God. Where are the great prophets been? After the apostles Where have the great prophets been? Where has God really spoken like he did in the Old Testament? But with that, where is the devil? Yeah, we still have demons. And it talks about in Daniel that all the demons from Babylon were scattered. So these unclean spirits, which have been the offspring of the Watchers, right? The Nephilim, when they die, according to Enoch, create demons. So their souls don't go to Sheol. They don't rest. They wander upon the earth, desiring a body. So that's why they like to inhabit people, because they want to feel the feelings that they once felt as creatures. I wouldn't say humans. They're humanoid. That was a rabbit trail. All right. I had fun with that. Glad we went there. I like a little crazy to end this all. So cheers, guys. Chapter 4. I'm sure you won't be joining me for Chapter 5, because actually Chapter 5 is going to be really good, because I've already written some stuff on Chapter 5 before, so you might go ahead and just read that. Very interesting stuff about the temple. I like it. All right. Please, questions, comments, lay it on me. I will ask the group. Not saying we're going to have answers, but I'll come at you with some strange theory for sure.